2021. Please note that you're able to provide public comment. To register, please send an email to ocpc@seattle.gov with public comment in the subject line. We will also allow community members attending by phone to register for public comment by voice. For those wishing to do so at the beginning of the public comment period, when prompted, please unmute yourself and say your name to register. Speakers must be registered in order to be recognized. And if you are unable to attend the remote meeting, please again submit written comments to the Community Police Commission at ocpc@seattle.gov. The Seattle Community Police Commission acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Muckleshoot, Suquamish, and Duwamish people, past and present. With humility, we recognize how much we benefit from living on their land and water. The Seattle Community Police Commission honors and lifts up these tribes. We hope that this acknowledgement will encourage authentic relationships with urban Native people and all Coast Salish tribes. I'm going to take attendance. Prachi is not with us today. Suzette is also not with us. Colleen?
Present.
Thank you. Good morning. Austin?
Present.
Good morning. Aaron is out today. Reverend Hunter?
Present.
Good morning. Thank you. Tasha?
Sorry, was that Tasha?
Yes. Tasha, are you here?
Oh, yes, I must be having connectivity issues. Sorry, I am
Okay.
present. Sorry.
No worries. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Esther?
Here.
Good morning. Thank you. Asha? Is Asha with us this morning? Officer Mullins? I believe I saw Officer Mullins join. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning. Thank you for joining. Erica?
Present.
Good morning. Thank you. Dr. Pinto?
Present.
Good morning. Thank you
Morning.
for joining. Eilena? Team, I believe Eilena's having some trouble being able to log in. So if I could get my staff to offer some support to Eilena and reach out to him. Thank you. Joseph?
Present.
Good morning. Thank you for joining. Catherine?
Present.
Good morning. Douglas?
Present.
Good morning. Reverend Walden?
Present.
Good morning. And then we have,
Good morning.
thank you. We have Lejaya, who is still on leave. So that it speaks for everyone that is on the roster. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for joining us. If I could have you all, someone put forth a motion to approve the draft agenda for this morning.
I'll make the motion. This is Colleen.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Same for the CPC draft minutes. Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
And then Brandy, I think we need a vote on both, right?
For the draft agenda, the minutes.
Yep. Yes, we need to carry through the motion.
Okay. So let me go through the roster again. My apologies. Colleen?
You might not have to have a voice vote on the agenda.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes, I vote yes.
Okay, all those in favor, I apologize. For all those in favor,
Aye.
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 any abstentions? Any nays? Okay, same for the draft minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
abstentions? Any nays? All right. They have been approved and accepted. Based on the agenda, we have action item reviews from the previous meeting. There were a few things that we were unable to get to, and that was the conversation about the OPA draft manual and some recommendations for edits, and a conversation around the police practices letter that was also has been referenced in the last couple of meetings. And there later in the agenda, there will be a brief overview of the draft manual edits that we're wanting to provide to OPA. And work group leads will speak to updates regarding the police practices letter. In your supplemental materials that commissioners received, there was a consideration of a resolution to amend the CPC bylaws so that we would be able to, with the stepping down of former co-chairs, be able to put, do an early election, so to speak. So when we're in situations like this that we currently find ourselves in, we would be able to appoint interim commissioners who are not all from different appointing bodies. So in the materials that we sent, there was a draft language for you all to consider. If no one needs any additional time to read over, would someone like to put forth a motion on the floor to vote for the amended resolution?
I'll make a motion that that we vote on this amended resolution that's been presented today.
Second.
Okay. I'm going to go through roll to do a vote to approve of the resolution to amend CPC bylaws. Sorry, Colleen Eckelhawk,
Yes.
Austin,
Yes.
Reverend Hunter,
Yes.
Tasha,
Yay?
Esther,
Yes.
Officer Mullins,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Dr. Pinto,
Yes.
Eilina,
Yes.
Joseph, Joseph, are you still there? I will come back to Joseph. It looks like he's having problems, maybe unmuting. Catherine,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Reverend Walden,
Yes.
Joseph, are you able to unmute yourself? Joseph, if you can hear me, for this to pass, we have to have 2/3 vote. We are missing one vote for this amended resolution. All right, you all.
I'll text him real quick, Brandy. Hold
Okay.
on.
Or
You might
even
be
you can call him, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Thanks for everybody's patience.
Brittany, I have to hop off to call in, but I'll be right back.
Okay.
Just hop in there and
I am so sorry. This is Joseph.
Okay. For the good of the order, would I need to start the vote over, or do I just allow Joseph to cast his vote?
I believe Joseph can cast his vote because he was already present in the beginning. He set the quorum. I'm not, I mean, I don't, Teresa might be on, but he was here when we set the quorum. He might have just stepped aside. He didn't say he was leaving the meeting. So he was part of the quorum. So my understanding of Robert's rules of order that he would still be able to vote. Now, if I'm mistaken, Teresa can correct me.
You are not mistaken. Reverend Walden's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Joseph, are you in approval of us moving forward with the amended bylaw?
Yes, apologize about that. I had to step to had a bio break.
That is okay. All right. That concludes the voting of, and the bylaw amendment is approved with 13 yeas. Thank you, everybody. Now that we've able to do the consideration of the resolution to amend bylaws, there was a slate that was previously put forth in our meeting where we discussed the co-chair elections. I'm asking at this time, if there is not another slate to put forth, can I have someone put forth a motion on the floor to vote for the current slate, which includes Catherine, Douglas, and Reverend Walden?
I'll put forward the motion.
Second.
All right, we will do a roll call vote so I can capture them. Colleen,
Yes.
Austin,
Yes.
Reverend Hunter,
Yes.
Tasha,
Yes.
Esther,
Yes.
Officer Mullins,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Dr. Pinto,
Yes.
Elena,
yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Catherine,
I abstain since I am in the slate.
Douglas,
Yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to abstain, but I'll just say yes.
it is also my understanding that you all are able to vote. You do not have to abstain because we would have to have a 2/3 vote.
Oh, okay. I apologize, Brandy. Can I change my vote?
Yes,
Okay, my vote is yes. Thank you.
thank you. Douglas,
Yes.
Reverend Walden,
Yes.
thank you. That concludes our voting. There were 13 yeas. So the vote is approved for the current slate of Commissioners Catherine, Douglas, and Reverend Walden will be our co-chairs moving forward. Thank you so much. Do you all have anything you'd like to say or add to the conversation before I turn it over to Jesse for public comment?
I just have something to say. As this is Reverend Walden, I just want the commissioners to know that I'm not trying to lead. I'm just trying to guide. And so I'll just be there for, for consideration and to help guide so we can get to the next level. And also, hopefully, we can come back and look at the bylaws that we can fill in the places where we have the gaps at for the unknowable and unseeable and what happened before when people stepped down and all at one time. So since I'm the person who's been here the longest, I'm not trying to take over. I want to just guide so new people can be leading. And I come off next year anyway. So that's all. That's all. I will not be the face of CPC. Will not be making comments and all that stuff. The new commissioners will get an opportunity to have full understanding and work as the co-chairs. I just wanted to assure people who've been on the commission for a while that that's not going to be my role. So thanks.
This is Commissioner Joseph. Well, I hear you, Commissioner Harriet, and we do respect and value as the leaders. So we're going to honor you regardless as a chair.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both.
Recording in progress.
Is there anyone else that has anything to add before we go into public comment?
I'd like to add, I'm really looking forward to working with Reverend Walden and Douglas and as co-chairs and with all of you as commissioners to continue to move this work forward. So looking forward to the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all stepping up to the plate, and I'm looking forward to working with you all in a much larger capacity. Jesse, I'm going to turn it over to you for a public comment.
Thank you. Just 1 second here. All right, we have 2 people signed up for public comment so far. The first one is Dr. Howard Gale. Let me pull up the clock real quick. And Dr. Gale, you can get started when you're ready. All right, next up for public comment is Valerie.
Good morning, CPC. I attended the community engagement meeting on Zoom last night. Most commissioners weren't at that meeting, so I hope you watched the video and that I see more of you at future community engagement meetings. I also hope to see a greater presence of Seattleites who are primarily there to further police accountability. Many people who've been harshly impacted by bad policing, even recently, have become frustrated and re-traumatized and have given up on trying to engage with Seattle's police accountability system. Rising concern about crime, gun violence, and social disorder were expressed at last night's meeting and have also been expressed at recent CPC meetings. Well, of course, those concerns are being expressed all over Seattle. I have them too, but there are good reasons to believe that real accountability would make a better police force, which would be more able and more willing to address really tough challenges. It seems like concerns about crime are steering CPC's community engagement off course from the original mission and purpose under the consent decree. What I experienced last night seemed a lot like police or city government outreach, which is fine in itself, but what I had hoped for was a citizens meeting about furthering accountability to reform policing. The CPC itself has explained that under the accountability legislation, it is now, quote, mandated to also provide ongoing community-based oversight of SPD and the police accountability system, unquote. Please don't lose sight of that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. And I'm going to stop sharing, make sure that nobody else has signed up for public comment. And we don't have anybody by phone either. We do not. So public comment is officially done.
All right, thank you, Jesse. And I just want to thank the Dr. Gale and Valerie for the comments that they were able to provide. I just want to make sure, you know, as the ED, I ask that I'm hoping with great clarity that when people quote us or discuss things that the CPC is doing, that, you know, I really employ you all to make sure that you're quoting us in our entirety. And being clear and transparent about all of the pieces that you are referencing. But again, I do appreciate the feedback. I'm really hoping that more community members such as the two of you will work more with us from a place of solutions and collaboration, and we move away from a lot of the deficiency conversations and language. Yes, we do. We have a lot of work that we can do and we will be doing, and we want to make sure that community members are working with us. I also want to make sure that when we are providing public comment, because we're in the middle of establishing some clearer roles here at the CPC, that we make sure that comments are focused on items that are on the agenda. We would really appreciate that, respectfully so. Joseph, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate what you're saying, ED Brandy. Yeah, to Dr. Gale about the lack of response around the Yosia Faletongo. I mean, that's just to me like not an honest statement or comments, because our community, the Pacific Islander community, was very much activated at the front of that process, walked our community through the process, supported the family as they were looking for social and support, you know, due to Yosia's killing, and also after the process when the findings were presented to our Pacific Islander community. So I just want to reiterate that, you know, if we're going to bring up issues, that we acknowledge that there's work being done in communities of color that you might not be involved in, and to please respect that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Walden, did you have something to add?
No, I don't. Well, let me cut off this noise. I thought I had fixed things. I'm very sorry. I apologize. I just wanted to actually echo Joseph because it was a lot that was going on, and it was in that community with great respect. And I really want to thank Joseph for his leadership on that. And also, we did have questions about that shooting. I mean, I know that the partners meet all the time, and that was one of the shootings that I've had lots of questions about. And of course, the inquest process is still going to happen. I mean, because the final say is not here. I mean, because with the new inquest process, it's going to be a lot different going forward. I mean, and Mr. Gale might be aware of the new inquest process, that there was a 9-0 ruling on the Supreme Court to go forward that will give the families, like the Fatola families, be able to have greater access in this process. They'll have representation. Unlike the old inquest, that family will have representation. They'll have an attorney. New information will be able to be presented, In the past, it was no new information. The family's attorney had to absolutely just question what was already presented by SP by the Seattle Police Department attorneys. This is a new day here in Seattle, in King County, with this new ruling. And so no matter what this other finding was, it's not the final finding. And now let's be clear about that. And maybe we can have a presentation about what the new inquest process means to Charlena Lau's families. All of these families, it's not over yet, that other process. And we might have some attorneys on the line of other people who can speak to this, but it's not over yet. And it infers that it's over. But there's another level, and we don't know down the road, these same officers, even if they've gone to another department, we don't know, but they could still be held liable for the death for that shooting. See.
Thank you, Reverend
Thank
Walden.
you. Thank you.
Joseph, I see your hand still up. Did you have anything else to add, or is it still up from the previous comment?
No, sorry.
No worries. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. We will begin department updates. Is anyone here from City Council to provide an update to the commission?
Yes, this is Newell Aldrich from Councilmember Herbold's office. Just want to follow up to note that the council did pass the less lethal weapons legislation. And just a reminder, the starting point for that was the 3 recommendations that were put forward by the accountability bodies. Councilor Herbold did note the CPC support for the legislation in her comments, but also noted the concerns the CPC had and positioned that more was needed. So when she mentions the CPC support, she's also been mentioning that aspect of the CPC's position. The legislation under the consent decree process has 4 steps. The first step is that SPD has 60 days to draft policy revisions. After that, the formal consent decree process review by the Department of Justice and the court-appointed monitor kicks in, and they do their review. The third stage would be court review of policy revisions, and the legislation would go into effect if the court approves it. So just wanted to mention that the council also approved a mid-year supplemental budget earlier this week that included revisions to SPD and some of the things that they have requested, as well as some things that community have requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Newell. Will there be an opportunity for the timeline to be shared with the commission so we can outwardly share that with community? And then I think my other question would be, is there an opportunity for potentially council to do a little bit of a presentation or have a conversation here amongst the commission and the public with our audience?
Do you just mean generally or?
Yeah, generally.
Okay, I can certainly ask Councilmember Herbold about that and be in touch with you about potential dates. As for the schedule, we can certainly get you something, though I think the first point of the timeline is, I think, October 27th is this when the 60-day period would end for SPD to update policies. So I think that's the next key date, but we can get you more information about that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you all have any questions for Newell or anything else to add? Is Is anyone here from the mayor's office to provide an update? Okay. The monitoring team?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Good morning.
Splendid. Since the last meeting of the Community Police Commission, the monitoring team participated in the following events. The same evening as the September 1st meeting, I represented the monitor team by attending the North Precinct Advisory Council meeting. The guest speaker at that meeting was Monica Alexander, who in June was named as Executive Director of the State Criminal Justice Training Center, which you know is responsible for training of law enforcement officers. She succeeded Sue Rahr. I found this of particular interest because Monica Alexander is really a pioneer in terms of law enforcement. She was the first Black woman with the Washington State Patrol to serve as sergeant, lieutenant, and then captain. I found her views with regard to what her future plans are for training at the academy to be quite interesting. And I think they ought to be more widely heard by everybody in this process. They're obviously germane to where we're all trying to get to. On September 7th, the monitor team attended a meeting with Mayor Jenny Durkin. We discussed various issues, including the Council of Less Lethal legislation and crowd management control. In a team meeting, and discussed various issues, including the less lethal weapons ordinance by the City Council, methodology with regard to the implementation of the monitor plan, the 2021 annual report. We discussed officer wellness and future accountability measures. On September 13th, the monitor team met with the Department of Justice. We discussed data deadlines, methodology, less lethal weapons ordinance by the City Council, data evaluations, and stops and detentions. On September 14th, I represented the monitor team at the CPC community engagement meeting. I thought there was a robust exchange of views at that meeting, and I look forward to attending further meetings on the community engagement ongoing forum focus and methodology issues. That concludes our report.
Thank you, Ron.
I had a quick question, Mr. Ward. We haven't met. I'm a newer commissioner. Thank you very much for being here. I was curious. My name is Austin Field.
Hi, Austin. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good.
Great. So I just had a quick question. You mentioned that you met with the mayor about the council less lethal ordinance, and I know there was a bit of a back and forth between the council and the mayor about whether the ordinance ran afoul of the consent decree at all. But I wasn't sure what the monitoring team's position was on whether or not it did.
We don't have a position on it at this point, and it would be inappropriate for us to do so until the process is brought to full fruition. I think Mr. Aldrich discussed the fact of what the evolution will be now through the in terms of review of that ordinance by DOJ, by the monitor, and then ultimately scrutiny by the court. So we did not discuss that aspect of it and whether it in fact contravenes the consent decree, because it would be premature.
And my only follow-up question with that would be that I've seen some things that say that the ordinance was developed with the monitoring team that they solicited monitoring team feedback before before writing it and voting on that. Is that accurate or?
Not, if not other than what you heard at the status conference, in remarks the judge may have peripherally made in that regard. We did not participate in any manner with regard to the drafting of this ordinance, and we haven't tried to steer it in any manner with regard to the language articulated. Our comments with regard to this will be made, within the context of the time that I mentioned, and shared initially with the judge before they're shared with anyone else.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Austin. Department of Justice.
Hi, good morning, guys. Sorry, I'm not appearing on video, but hopefully you can hear me. I don't think that Ron or Newell misstated the situation in any way. So I would just say that's a correct sort of statement of the state of play on the work that we're doing. I would just add to Austin's question, there might be a slightly different answer to it from DOJ. So let me just add, as you guys are, I'm sure aware, in the summer of 2020, when the original less lethal weapons ordinance was passed by council, we had sought a temporary restraining order, which was granted by the judge and later converted into a preliminary injunction by agreement of the city. And the reason for that was it did not provide for the consent decree process for review that was just described by Newell, where it comes to DOJ and the monitoring team and the court once it has been drafted into policy. So that was a concern to us, as was just we wanted to make sure that process was able to go forward, because there's the possibility that when you take away less lethal tool options, that you could inadvertently create a situation where higher force is necessary. So we wanted to make sure that the review process called for by the consent decree was able to go forward to make sure that those concerns had a vehicle to be addressed and to be reviewed. So Ron is right, we haven't engaged in that yet, and Newell is correct about the timeline of when we would engage in that. Austin, in answer to your question, City Council did reach out to us with some, with a draft to say, are there issues that you see right now that we could address before this moves forward? And we're somewhat limited because we don't weigh in on city legislative processes. The time when we would weigh in on something like this is when it comes to a policy revision by the Seattle Police Department. However, we did want to avoid a situation where we were moving for another TRO. So what we did do was present some of the questions we would have. Is there going to be a built-in period for DOJ, the monitoring team, and the court to review this? Will there be opportunity for officers to be trained prior to the implementation of new rules? What will be instruction to officers in terms of different options that they will have available if the ones proposed are taken away? So those were the nature of our comments. It was more questions. And that was the nature of our feedback so far. So I hope that answers Austin's questions, and I'm happy to answer anyone else's.
Could you say what a TRA means for new commissioners who might not be familiar with that language? Christina, please.
Sure, I'm sorry, I thought I did, but yeah, it's a temporary restraining order. So we had moved the court to intervene. As you guys may have recalled, the way that the original ordinance was becoming effective was then Chief Best issued a directive to officers to implement the ordinance. And that directive is the same as a change to policy under the consent decree. So we had moved for a temporary restraining order from the court to stop that implementation until and unless this review period called for by the consent decree could transpire. The new draft does have language in it that ensures that it will go through the consent decree's review process prior to implementation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Office of Inspector General.
Yes, good morning, all. We're continuing to work in the same areas we had as last time, so I don't have any new updates in those areas. I'm looking forward to your comments on the OPA manual, and so I think it would be useful for us to get together just to discuss where our respective agencies are headed on that.
Thank you, Amy. That sounds good.
Hello. Officer Mullins has a question.
Yes.
Of the DOJ, is there any suggested or plans to discuss what the other options are when less lethal is taken away? Do we have any idea about what might take the place of that, or?
So I think, I hope this doesn't sound like a dodge to your question, Officer Mullins, but I think that analysis is still in the future for us. So if there are revisions to SPD policy that change the circumstances in which officers can use certain types of force, we would certainly be interested in what guidance is being provided about what they should do instead in those circumstances. So to the extent that's your question, it would be our question too. And I think that we are going to wait to see how SPD proposes to revise its policies, and then we'll do that review.
What I'm afraid of, and the reason why I asked that question, is we all witnessed the Capitol Hill incident in which officers were not equipped. Not the fact that they didn't have less lethal, they weren't equipped with it. And in facing the kind of force that they faced, which was Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, things of this nature. People who bring weapons. My concern is, how do officers protect themselves? That's my question.
Yes, thank you for raising that. I think that will certainly be part of the analysis and the discussion when it comes to us. Thanks.
Office of Police Accountability. Is anyone here from OPA? Okay. Thank you all for the department updates. We are going to begin our Community Police Commission updates. The updates from myself, the Executive Director, most of my updates are coming in the form of work covered in the items on the agenda. So you will have an opportunity to hear about those things throughout the remainder of the agenda. Is there any new CPC business? Anything anyone would like to add?
Excuse me, I'd like to add in the future for new, well, that would be new business though. Is that right now a new business? Because I don't have anything to add today. It's just about the bylaws and working on the bylaws. So, but if that's not right now, I can just wait till the end of the meeting to add it for maybe a future time.
Yes, ma'am. Reverend Walden, yes, if you could add it at the end, that'd be perfect for the wrap up.
Okay, I'm good.
Absolutely, but I'll make note now as well. Work group updates. behavioral health.
Hi, everyone. This is Naveen Pinto. Let me turn on my camera. So we have worked together, both Catherine and myself, with the amazing help of staff, Nia and Louisa, to develop a behavioral health work group plan, which was circulated to commissioners, I believe, prior to the September 1st meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be present at that meeting, so we asked to table the discussion of our work group plan until this meeting. But commissioners should have received a copy of our outlined plan. I'll be relatively brief in an overview of that plan. Again, you should have the materials to review, and happy to answer any questions. But the overview of our plan is focused, thank you for sharing, on behavioral health and de-escalation. And we identified 3 topics for this work. First, addressing SPD's training, policies, practice, and support for officers' behavioral health, inclusive of officer wellness and officer support and training on addressing racial bias, implicit bias, and self-awareness skills. Secondly, to address SPD's training, policies, and practice in response to behavioral health challenges in the community. And third, to address SPD's de-escalation training, policies, and practice, and the evidence of their benefit. So again, I won't go through this whole document and read every word out loud to you, but those were the areas that we chose to focus on. And we hoped to, in reviewing current policies and procedures, to review those for the larger commission and present that data to you, with the goal of making recommendations where gaps in training exist or where evidence suggests that training is inadequate to address current issues, either for officer wellness or for behavioral health or de-escalation policies in the community. So we're just in the beginnings of this. We haven't reviewed any of these policies yet, but we're hoping that through reviewing these policies, the commission can have a better handle on what is going on in SPD to address these issues, both with officers and in the community, and where applicable, provide our input as the community police commission on whether any adjustments could or should be made to those policies. So we've identified several action items that are outlined below. And so we'll be working with members of SPD, hopefully. Lieutenant Tuttle was identified as a great contact to discuss officer wellness strategies, and hoping to have the lieutenant join us for future work group meetings. Again, really this involves reviewing a lot of policies and procedures that are already in place. And then I think if we could scroll down, just wanted to make sure I touch on any really, again, these are just sort of the programs that Catherine and the staff identified as ongoing programs that we wanted to get a handle on. And I think these were the sort of low-hanging fruit that we thought could be our first stab at reviewing. Again, I think commissioners have this materials to review themselves. I'm happy to, and Catherine, I'm sure, is happy to answer any questions that people may have, or Catherine, if you have anything you'd like to add to what I've presented, please feel free.
I don't. Thank you so much, Dr. Pinter, for going over this. And I echo, I'm so happy to hear any feedback or questions on this work group plan.
And Officer Mullins, I did want to note that we added a bullet here that we'd love your input as well, and obviously would love to invite you to be a part of this work group or provide your insights on these matters, both within SPD and within the community, as somebody with the most experience in this realm. Great.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Pinto. Thank you, Catherine and staff, everyone that worked on this well thought out and very intentional work group plan.
I'd like to have a comment too. I'd just like to have a comment to say thank you. Thank you to Dr. Pinto and Catherine. And I'm so glad that it's being presented here so the commissioners can see that the work groups was actually trying to get work done. And it's so wonderful that it's here. And then also noted that that the work group, Dr. Pinto and Catherine, was actually listening and heard Officer Mullen when he was mentioning the Office of Wellness that Elena had so championed before. So anyway, this is just wonderful, and I just wanted to thank everybody, the staff and the commissioners and the co-chairs who's involved with this. Thank you so much.
Yes, this is Officer Mullins. I muted myself. I'm sorry. I want to thank you, Dr. Pinto, and everybody involved with picking up that ball and running with it. It is definitely needed. It is definitely needed, and I plan on assisting you guys any way I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think your point of de-escalation begins with officer oneness was a point very well taken, and we're hoping that we can evaluate this from all angles and provide input where applicable.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. Police practices.
I'll be giving the update for that today. Just a couple of things. The first one, so we are beginning to develop some recommendations for ways for the commission to engage with OPA management action recommendations, which are a subset of the OPA's work where when they investigate a complaint and they find that the policy is too vague for the officer to have known that they shouldn't have done whatever it was that they did, they will issue a finding of not sustained for the complaint, and then they'll issue a non-binding recommendation to SPD. So we're looking at those recommendations. We're looking to see which have been implemented and which haven't. And we're also looking at the broader process of these management action recommendations, because for me personally, I'm concerned that it creates it accidentally creates an incentive to have vague policies, because it's a situation where the complaint will be officially found not sustained, and then the policy doesn't actually have to be revised. So I'm worried that there's perverse incentives being created there, and we're interested to take a look at that. I'm also happy to be corrected if anybody has a different take on that. We're also looking at wrapping up our second round of review on our feedback for SPD's use of force and crowd management policies. The current version of that document was sent out to the commission ahead of our September 1st meeting. So feel free to review the document, send any edits or feedback to me or to Nia Franco, who's really taken the lead on drafting that and has done a great job. And then in our next meeting, we're going to have a presentation from a couple community members about their experiences this past summer, not this summer, but the summer before, living and working next to the East Precinct with all the turmoil that happened there. I know that Reverend Walden and a few other commissioners expressed interest in attending that meeting. So definitely let us or the staff know, and we'll make sure that that you get invited if you'd like to see that that presentation. And that's it for me. Oh, I do want to echo just very quickly all the thanks that have been given to the behavioral health work group people. That's awesome work, and it's exciting to see that getting done.
Thank you, Austin, and also thank you to the police practices work group. It's really good to be able to get this information out to the broader commission to see the things that are going on behind the scenes. So thank you for your work on that and providing that update. Community engagement.
Good morning. We had our first official community engagement open to the public meeting last night. I felt it was very well attended for the first one. I look forward to many more to come. It was a very, very robust conversation, and I didn't have a real outline other than basically to introduce the CPC and its work to the community, and also the work groups. The work groups, I will really am looking forward to having all of you the work on the work group report in and report out and up within the CPC community engagement meetings, so that you can learn from the community and the community can learn from you. But very good conversations. We got to hear a lot of perspectives on issues. We made lots of notes to turn around and follow up and carry on and bring about topics and subjects for the future of in future meetings. I really encourage everyone that can to join the meetings, because I want this community engagement meetings to work for you in the prospective areas that you're working in. The meetings are the second Tuesday at 6 o'clock. So the second Tuesday of each month. And if you have anything to present, just let me know ahead of time. I want to say thank you for all that are on the call today for being there last night.
Thank you, Felicia. We are going to move into policy team, going over review of the OPA manual edits.
Good morning, everyone. Shailene here. So what you received a couple weeks ago, and I'm sorry, I apologize. Let me come on camera and talk to you for a minute, and then I'm going to share my screen. So what we sent out to you not that long ago, a couple weeks back for your review, was the worksheets that staff had put together after reviewing Office of Police Accountability, or OPA, their draft manual. So what staff did was review the manual, and what they requested of us was to really look for any red flags or things we might like to have revised or edited, or just essentially give feedback. So we did just that. So we divided up the work by chapters and read and reviewed. And within the document, we made what I call professional comments or courtesy. And that's just like mostly typos, grammar. If there are things through a community perspective, we think someone would read it and they wouldn't necessarily understand it, that they could elaborate further on. And then separately on the worksheets that you received was then we gave you was a high level overview of that section, any critical info that we think you should know and have in your back pocket. And that was context for, then we added some, if there were red flags, things that rose to the top for us, which we would have placed in the feedback section. But there's also a place where we ask questions, things that we were unsure about or wanted to receive clarity from OPA regarding the manual, and or also feedback. So what you received with the materials that Emily sent out was a chart where we have compiled the questions and the feedback that we plan to send to OPA regarding their manual, their draft manual. And you also received said manual. It had about 8 chapters and then appendices at the bottom for you to also read along if you wish and to receive feedback, and then to send along any questions or comments you may have had. Didn't receive anything from anyone, that's totally fine. We may have captured everything you wanted to say. So what we hope to do this morning, we have about 30 minutes to do it, is I'm gonna pull up the chart that you received yesterday. So that has the questions and the proposed feedback. by chapter from staff. And we're hoping to receive any other feedback that you might have or questions you'd like us to place within the chart. We will then probably need someone to file a motion to vote on said chart and have that approved so that we can go ahead and we'll just polish it up, drop it into an email with some language, and then send that over to OPA so they can take a look at that and incorporate those edits or potentially have a conversation with us further about any of the feedback that we may have given then. And of course, any conversations that we have will be made, if they're not made here in the public space, if they're made in the back end with staff, we will also give that information on what was discussed and any changes that may have made. And if it's something more substantial, then we'll probably have to come back here to you all and talk about additional comments or feedback or questions that we may have. So let me go ahead and share my screen and I will bring this up for you. Give me one moment. Here we go. All right. Can everyone, let me get a shake of heads or a thumbs up when you can see this, and then I will move forward.
All good.
Perfect. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you, Jesse. All righty. So chapter 1, which is introduction. So no questions or feedback on that. It was very straightforward. So what I want to do is go essentially chapter by chapter. And even though we didn't have questions or feedback, did anyone else who read this section of the manual have any questions or feedback that they want us to incorporate here for chapter 1, introduction? Okay, great. If I go too fast or I start to speak and someone wanted to unmute themselves and say something, feel free to cut me off. I'll probably be able to hear you. No big deal. Because I can't always see if there's a hand raised. I'll try to scan that. And team, let me know if someone does raise their hand. I can't see it. But just interrupt me and I'll be able to hear you. Okay, so let's talk about chapter 2. This talks about personnel policies. No questions for this section, just some potential feedback that we have. So I know you all have received this. I'm gonna just kind of read through it anyways, just so we're all on the same page together this morning. And then we can take a vote on each chapter. We'll not take a vote on each chapter, talk about each chapter, and at the end we can take a vote, however you would like to do that, or vote by chapter if there's some issues that folks may have. So for chapter 2, personnel policies, the first bit of feedback that section 2.1 confidentially allows, if not encourages, for whistleblower protections for OPA employees who report potential misconduct to the Office of Inspector General, Community Police Commission, or another oversight body. And that's to ensure that confidentially allows that for whistleblower protections. The second piece of feedback is that section 2.2 conflicts of interest says that OPA investigators are sometimes tasked with investigating individuals whom they may personally know or may have previously worked with. The OPA should explore stopping the practice of allowing OPA investigators to investigate individuals they have personal relationships or have previously worked with. Feedback 3, section 2.2 requires OPA personnel to exercise discretion in favor of recusing themselves from any process that might reasonably be expected to create a conflict or appearance of a conflict of interest. What we said is the policy should not rely on discretion. OPA should explore creating a standard form in which OPA investigators and personnel report all possible conflicts of interest they may have in case prior to being assigned to it. This form should be completed prior to each assignment. Fourth piece of feedback. If a complaint is made against OPA employee, section 2.2 conflicts of interest allows the OPA director to determine whether there is a conflict of interest and notify OPA whether it or OIG will investigate the complaint. This should be amended so that OIG is automatically charged with investigating said complaint. Number 5, in section 2.2, conflict of interest, in the event of an OIG investigation of an OPA employee, that employee is granted to contractual protections consistent with the most restrictive collective bargaining agreement, CBA. This should be amended so the employee being investigated is entitled to contractual protections consistent with their own collective bargaining agreements. And the last one for chapter 2, is in section 2.3, non-retaliation. It may benefit OPA to make clear that the presumed discipline for retaliation or for failure to report knowledge of retaliation shall be termination. These are the 6 pieces of feedback for Chapter 2, Personnel Policies. Any questions or comments or feedback or additions that anyone would like made to this chapter?
I have a question on the last one that you just explained. I mean, I didn't quite get that one. So could you just tell me about that last one? You said
Yes.
about termination. I mean, could you just, I'm not in disagreement with it. I just want you to just tell me about it a little bit. I didn't quite hear it, if you could, please.
Oh yeah, I can actually read it again too, and then I can turn it over to, well, Jesse just came up. Jesse, this is one of Jesse's sections. I can turn it over to Jesse as well. That's playing your work. Apologies. Go for it, Jesse.
Oh, sorry. So yes, this is about a non-retaliation policy. So it says that like it's against policy to retaliate. This recommendation would just like make sure that if there's retaliation against someone making a complaint or anything like that, that the presumed discipline would be termination. It doesn't say what the discipline would be, but it just would ensure that retaliation is taken as a most serious offense of OPA policy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Thank you, Reverend Walden, for that question and for the clarification. Any other questions about this chapter? Okay. I'm going to move on to Chapter 3, Operations Policies. Again, I will read through the feedback that we propose to send up to OPA. And this was Jesse's section, so I still have him on the line if there's any other in the weeds questions. So section 3.3, emergency preparedness, requires the OPA to designate a line of succession in the occurrence the OPA director position is suddenly vacated. There should be accompanying language guaranteeing no police officers are in that line of succession. Number 2, section 3.5, release of information, sets forth a policy through which public disclosure requests received by OPA are handled by SPD's public disclosure unit. More research and community engagement should be done to guarantee the independence of SPD's public disclosure unit, whether records requests for OPA documents are being fulfilled in a timely manner, whether community members are comfortable going through SPD to receive OPA records, and whether better alternatives exist for handling these records requests. Number 3, section 3.5, release of information, says officer cards, electronic copies of employees' OPA records may only be reviewed by SPD command staff, recruiters from other policing agencies, and OPA staff. Would it be possible for CPC or OIG to access officer cards if the need arose, even if that required the cards being anonymized? I think I said that word correctly. Okay. If I didn't, we all can see it, so we know what we mean here.
You did, and I put this in the recommendation thing, but this could also just function as in the question column too, I suppose.
I saw that. It looks at both, but it's also some good feedback for them. So I thought it was nicely placed here, Jesse, actually. And number 4, section 3.6, training and professional development, outlines the trainings OPA investigators are encouraged or required to complete. 19 training topics are listed for new investigators. However, none are community-based or focus on race and social justice. The following section says the topic of race and social justice should be covered in training for all investigators annually. A, the OPA should add local community-based trainings and race and social justice training to the list of trainings for new OPA investigators. And the OPA should inform the CPC of what community-based trainings and race and social justice trainings the OPA already engages in and will work with us to ensure they are thorough and meet community expectations. Number 5, section 3.6, annual report, outlines the data information included in the OPA's annual report. Understanding that the current collective bargaining agreements with the city's police union limit some of the work OPA can do. In each annual report, the OPA should include an assessment on how contractual provisions have affected the OPA's work. Section 3.7, mobilization for unusual circumstances, says that although rare, sworn officers acting as OPA investigators may be deployed in the event of disturbances, riots, or other unusual occurrences. This section should include a guarantee that OPA investigators deployed during such events are barred from investigating complaints related to those events. This is all the feedback proposed for Chapter 3, Operations Policies. Any questions or additions or concerns that commissioners may have for this proposed feedback? And again, if you wanted to follow along, you received this yesterday when Emily sent out the supplemental materials. If you want to pull up on your screen, if I'm going too quickly or going too slow, either way. All right, moving forward. Chapter 4, special considerations. One of the questions and a series of questions that we have for OPA is in section 4.1. Are there cases where OPA does not default to SPOG's CBA requirements? Who decides which CBA process to follow? And how often does OPA use SPOG requirements for employees not represented by SPOG? Just some questions that are not clear here, so we're hoping to get some feedback, but also would offer some light to OPA on kind of where maybe some clarifying language can be added to answer said questions, whether it's to us or within the manual. So the proposed feedback that we have is one, introduction, add an introduction section added to this chapter to orient the reader on when these considerations need to be taken into account, talking about the questions in the second column. Without the suggested addition, the section reads as a collection of pieces of information put together because there was no other place for them. And the second piece of feedback is section 4.4 does not explicitly state how an investigator should get in contact with a complainant who is represented by an attorney in connection to the complaint OPA is investigating. That's pretty important. Everything should be laid out. Any questions, comments, additions that anyone would like to add to chapter 4 of special considerations?
Sorry, Jillian, I'm just wondering, what does CBA stand for?
Collective bargaining agreement contract. I apologize. I will try to get out the acronym language and use the full terminology, which means from time to time I will point to staff as it is early. Okay. Moving on to chapter 5, complaint receipt and intake. So a few questions here, mostly questions, but a few questions and a few pieces of feedback. So in section 5.2a, if a complaint was made anonymously and needs to be referred to another agency, how does OPA gain the complainant's consent? If they cannot gain consent, are the complaints still forwarded to the appropriate agency for investigation? Question 2. What happens if an OPA investigator does not disclose a potential conflict of interest before initiating an intake investigation? And last question for the section, disciplinary records are important to determine if an officer and SPD has a pattern or history of misconduct. Yet, if a complaint is resolved through an expedited investigation or mediation, there is essentially no record of the misconduct attached to the officer. For expedited investigations, allegations cannot be sustained and mediations do not appear on disciplinary records. How does SPD/OPA find and track officers with repeated misconduct offenses? Some instances are kept off their records. This question came up because it's not clear, but also, have you heard, I know Riverwalden has brought this up, this question repeatedly on how they're tracking, how are we keeping track of those repeated offenders? So really happy about this question. Those are the questions. So moving on to the proposed feedback we have for this chapter. So just a couple of things, Roman numerals under 5.2b, RV and VI, when they should be I and II, which are respectively the numbers. And that's just one professional courtesy that we put here and also in the document. In section 5.4b, the second sentence ends in a way that is not very clear. Please see the note in the document. The document you received within the manual, there is a comment bubble. So if you refer to that, you will see exactly what that note is. And hopefully you all have already done this in back-end work to be prepared for today. And last piece of feedback, mediation and rapid adjudication are mentioned in the section on alternative dispute resolutions and classification types and definitions, which could cause confusion to the reader. I'm sorry, can everyone go on mute because I'm hearing some background noise and it's kind of, well, it's more than distracting. I think it's kind of over talking me just a little bit. Thank you so much. I'll read the last one more time. Mediation and rapid adjudication are mentioned in the section on alternative dispute resolutions and classification types and definitions, which could cause confusion to the reader. So essentially, we're asking them to kind of pick and choose or make that clear. So these are the questions that we have and the proposed feedback that should be incorporated within the manual for Chapter 5, complaint receipt and intake. Any questions, comments, concerns, or potential additions that anyone would like to make based on your review? Okay. We are moving right along. Very pleased. Chapter 6, the investigation process. So a few questions here. I think there's about 8. Yes, correct. There are about 8 of these. Let me go through the questions. What happens after an OPA investigator discloses a conflict of interest? Is having worked alongside a named employee considered a conflict of interest? How are these documented? And what happens if investigators don't disclose these conflicts? If an investigation requires assistance from others in OPA, do others also have to disclose conflicts of interest? Number 2, why would OPA seek to have a virtual interview with an employee? Are the circumstances different than a witness or complainant? Number 3, does the CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement, require that OPA attaches the complaint summary to the interview email sent to an employee? Number 4, why can captains choose not to receive a complaint against officers they supervise? Number 5, if an employee misses an interview, do they have advance notice again, up to 30 days in some cases? How many times can this happen? Are there any consequences other than that supervisor can consider whether to initiate a new OPA complaint? Number 6, investigators provide employees and union representatives with a copy of the interview recording. Do complainants and witnesses also get one? Number 7, what happens if a union representative's objections are disruptive, argumentative, leading, subjective, prejudicial, insulting, or profane? Is there any accountability for their participation? And lastly, what happens after OIG does not certify an investigation because it is not thorough, timely, and objective, but does not request or direct additional investigation? So those are the questions that we have and require clarification. Here's the proposed feedback that we have for this chapter. 1, it should be required to ask interviewees about barriers and provide the needed accommodations, translators, ADA, etc. 2, OPA should conduct all interviews in pairs. 3, OPA should always initiate a complaint against an employee who fails to appear. 4, there should be more robust language and processes to verify conflicts of interest and bias in assessing the credibility.
The qualifications that they could do, the work that they can do. So this is just a good example of being able to show the fine work that the highly qualified people who are leading the policy team for the CPC. So thank you. And then I won't put a motion. I'll let somebody else put a motion. I just wanted to give some kudos to the CPC team.
Thank you, Reverend Walden. We appreciate that. Of course, policy team is myself, Mia, and Louisa, but also shout out to Jesse, who also helped lift this for us this go around as he usually does. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, we could have somebody put a motion on the floor to move to approve this.
This is Navino. Move to approve.
And I'll
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstentions?
Mhm. Mhm.
Any nays?
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We will move forward with submitting the edits and revisions that we have to OPA. And then you all, just thank you for, again, the staff and everybody that worked on this, the review process. I want to just kind of concur again what Reverend Walden was saying. Just to reassure y'all, I have an amazing team. These are great folks. They do incredible work. And I want that to always be highlighted here so you have an opportunity to see the things that go on behind the scenes. And that's not said enough. So thank you again to my team. I really appreciate you all. Let us move into now the annual report and accountability ordinance tracker review process.
Hello again, everyone. You're going to hear a lot of me today. I love speaking. So let's talk about the 2020 annual report. I know it's very dramatic the way I said that, but it's been a long time coming and we're very excited to kind of debut and showcase the work that has been put into the annual report. So we're going to have 3 parts to this discussion today. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so we have a little bit of extra time. So we have about 40-50 minutes to have this discussion. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to do an overview of the annual report. I'll share my screen and go section by section. Fortunately, I will not read it line by line to you. I will not do a dramatic reading. You've all had it in your on your plate for about 2 weeks. So I won't do a reading. I'll just go section by section and then just kind of allow folks to have a little bit of feedback at that time. Primarily, we'll save most of our questions and feedback for the end. And then, so I'll go through the annual report. Once we hit the section trackers, the sections about the trackers, which is towards the end, I will have Louisa come on and talk to you, not about the police accountability recommendations tracker that's already public, known as PART, but have her talk about the accountability ordinance tracker. This was a second tracker that was created, and I'm going to continue to say the word tracker. It tracks all the pieces and directives that are within the 2017 accountability ordinance. And we're, as a CPC, also mandated to keep track of those pieces as well. So we have created this. So not only for us and the accountability system, but also, the citywide, the public can also see where everyone is where it comes to the accountability system. So this piece was created. So Louisa will kind of do a nice tutorial, kind of walk you through it. It looks very similar to PART. And then also we will have to have some discussion on some of the pieces that come from or that are mandated to CPC, the language that we use to ensure that is in line with how we have interpreted that. So I'll leave that to her. So the third part of this conversation will be to open the floor once again to answer any questions about the annual report and the tracker, to receive any additional revisions, feedback, questions, or comments, and to have kind of like a working meeting of sorts. Hopefully within the time that we have allotted today, we can get through that in time for a vote on one or both the annual report and the accountability ordinance tracker, so they both can go live and go public. If we have a positive vote today for the annual report, the next step will be the policy team will continue to polish that report, clean up some items, anything we receive here. Then of course we will pass over to Jesse so he can do his wonderful and fabulous work of formatting, making it look absolutely beautiful and super professional. And then it will go live on our website and a copy will be submitted to the city clerk. Any questions about how we're gonna kind of run through this? Okay, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once more, and I will pull up the annual report. Can everyone see my screen here? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to get started. So, and I also will say thank you so much to Douglas, who was able to send some he called them minor, and minor or major doesn't matter. Any feedback is always helpful for us when you're in the weeds of work to kind of pull back and see some things that you may have missed or some language edits. So thank you so much, Douglas, for saying that over to us. We've incorporated these edits. I've left them largely in track changes so people can also see what was sent up. And then of course we have some comment bubbles in here. So let me get started because I've talked enough already in this introduction, and let's dive into this annual report. Of course, title page, lovely, beautiful, table of contents. And then at the top, per usual, you have a letter from the executive director, so from Brandy Grant. This really speaks to what we have accomplished within 2020, working within, the state legislative agenda, giving a little bit of background information, talking about the bargaining process, how we have someone at the table. Of course, we would be remiss if we didn't speak to the demonstrations, so that happens here as long with a large chunk within the report itself. So her letter here is a really nice overview of 2020 and a little bit of looking forward to what we've already accomplished this year and where we will continue to head in the future. And then of course, really nice picture of Brandy right here. So front and center in the sunshine. So we really like this front piece for it to kind of kick us off within the content. And we'll save some feedback towards the end, but if any point you do have questions or comments or things like, hey, I have a question about this, go ahead and interrupt me or raise your hand. And if I don't see it, someone on team will see it and they'll interrupt and they'll let me know. Okay, let's move forward. So one of our first sections is the community engagement. This primarily focuses on a couple of pieces, the COVID-19 impacts. Didn't want to focus too heavily. I'm sorry, Reverend Hunter, did you have a question? I see you unmuted yourself.
Oh, I didn't mean to unmute me.
Oh, that's okay. Didn't mean to call you out. I just thought you. Okay. So sorry, move forward. Do talk a little bit about the impacts of COVID-19 and how we've shifted as an agency with changing the way that we engage with the community with our Zoom platforms, using a lot more social media. And then also, we talk about more of that menu engagement strategies. And then the bigger piece of here, and you can see Douglas was like, hey, formatting, love it. Love to see it. So the bigger piece here is where we discuss the commissioners in the community. So this is where you all received that wonderful survey from Nia Franco asking about, hey, can you tell us what were you all involved in 2020? It was a long, grueling year, so I know it's a lot to remember and recall, but thank you for all of you that responded. And we talk about the over 50 community events, meetings, town halls, panels, webinars that you all attended as a CPC commissioner. So these are all listed here. And they're categorized in community meetings, conferences and trainings, and demonstrations, reoccurring in meetings, and of course, SPD meetings. So we have captured them all here. I believe we have had feedback from everyone. If there is something you missed as you review this list, please email it over to us before the end of today so we can capture that. So what we would need is what, based on these categories, kind of engagement you're speaking to, and then exactly what it was. So as we have listed here. The next section of our annual report is about demonstrations for Black Lives and Policing Justice. This was a big portion of 2020. It was policing and COVID seemed to be the theme. So here we just give a little bit of context and what was happening in 2020. But then of course, we, as residents of Washington and of Seattle, we wanted to talk about the folks who died at the hands of the Seattle Police Department. We listed them here from 2020 to 2013. And so we've heard from several commissioners when we have community engagements or we've spoken publicly about, yes, we understand that the murder of George Floyd, that seemed to kick off this slew of demonstrations, but things have happened here. We have suffered here. We've had trauma here and tragedy. So I wanted to make sure we captured that. The rest of this section really goes in order of demonstrations, how they first started. We start with like May 29th, the kickoff of demonstrations here in Seattle. and kind of walk through what seems to be a narrative timeline for folks. So if you were a person who didn't really understand what happened in Seattle during this time or in King County, this could be a really good historical capturing of that so people could kind of walk through it. So we move through here, we talk about the amount of complaints that OPA received from those protests against officers who were present. We talk about the standoff at the East Precinct, which we talked about here earlier today in this meeting, and the movement and how it continued to grow and change and evolve over time. We make a call out mention to our June 3rd Community Police Commission meeting. This predates most of the people on staff, except for a couple. But for someone like myself, who already was in the hiring process, I was actually present at this meeting on the back end watching through Facebook. And this was a pivotal moment for the CPCs during 2020, where a lot of you expressed your frustration, concerns, had incredible discourse with city leaders. So we wanted to capture that here. Now we talk about, then as part of the section, the recommendations that were made from all three of the oversight agencies, CPC, OIG, and OPA, and then specifically what we discussed when we talk about banning tear gas and the accountability system and the responses from city leadership. We then discuss, of course, the Chaz Chop and try to give a more community-centered depiction of these zones, as we'll call them, and the days in which this was alive and happening. So we have that placed here. And then we talk about continuing demonstrations that led into the summer and into the fall. And I believe we end this section with our crowd control opens ban in the CPC report to City Council after, as discussed earlier, when they passed the ban, and then our review of that legislation and our report out and recommendations that were made. We list them here and also talk about those made by our accountability partners, CPC, OIG, and OPA, that were all submitted to the city on August 14th. I'm sorry, there's a couple more sections here. We also talk about the defund and reinvest. Some of you that were around or weren't around during this time, this was one of the work groups. It was a demonstration management and defund, which eventually kind of morphed into one work group that were discussing those particular topics respectively and then combined together. And lastly, we do talk about some of the lingering demonstrations and investigations that happened to the end of Q3 into Q4 of 2020. Some of the marches, and then we give the numbers of, as the report's writing, how many investigations OPA has concluded based on the complaints that were filed against officers during those days of demonstrations that we have here. And then just some images that Jesse has placed. And a lot of these were actually taken by folks and or Jesse, people who were present from the CPC or on staff. The next section is about committees. So this, as you know, some of us newer staff had to go a little bit back and forth on which committees were actually committees and what that looked like. I know now we call them standing committees, ad hoc committees. That is new language that has come out of the bylaws as they were revised at the end of 2020 and voted on in 2021. So this is capturing what it actually looked like in 2020, because of course, this is the 2020 annual report. So the annual report for 2021 will capture the work groups as they appear now based on the new bylaws. And then there are a couple comments you'll see off to the side that we are just asking for folks to give a little bit more, and hopefully we can get that from individual commissioners that were present, the members of the executive director search specifically, and just ensuring that strategy, governance, and the executive director search are accurately reflected, and we capture that and characterize that in an appropriate manner, and also the members, the commissioners that staffed those. So if you have some insight and feedback, especially if the ED search, very happy to receive that by the end of the day today. But I do have a few folks that I can also ping separately, and I will. So just going over community engagement, committee strategy, governance, executive director search, police practices, demonstration management, the defund committee, and the state legislative agenda. This is section on committees. Next, we have our police accountability recommendations. So this these are housed Of course, as you all know, within our police accountability recommendations tracker, which we have this really beautiful graphic that Louisa put together right here, that folks that pull this up electronically can then click and be taken to the tracker, which is wonderful. But what we have is, of course, just a very clear outline of, we issued 52 recommendations, and then we have added individual links that link people to the website of where these pieces are housed and in which reports or letters that these recommendations are housed. So this is just a really, I think, clear and easy way for us to highlight those recommendations, but also to bring folks back into our website that we have been continuing to revamp and make sure is organized properly. Jesse's done a whole lot of work here to ensure that it meets with the vision and accessibility for the community. And so really excited to see how people are able to work with the annual report and going back to the website. Then we also list the actual recommendations here. We give the topic, our recommendation summary, and then SPD response and the update. So some of these are pending, you see declined, in progress, and then we have them related by topic and the recommendations themselves. And of course, all of this you can find here, but also in the tracker. So the next piece is the accountability ordinance. I won't go too much into this. I will leave this to Louisa after I finish talking about the annual report. She will go into this in depth so you can see the tracker as we will post it. What I'll give you as a small highlight is that this will always go into an annual report every single year. So we really just give the status of the accountability ordinance, where people are. We will talk about what's implemented, partially implemented, this really beautiful pie chart right here. And then because we hope to publish this tracker alongside with or right after the annual report, we have built in the tracker link. This is not yet live, so this link will not work, but it will be here so that people can click on it and go and view. I believe it's 258, yes, pieces from the accountability ordinance. So we have this housed here, and Louisa will go through the pieces, especially the ones that are highlighted that we also need to discuss, but I won't go into too much detail because she will do this. I don't want to talk this to death. So let me move forward just a little bit. I know it seems like quite a bit, but you're going to get back to this, I promise. And so the last bit here, of course, at the end is about the CPC. So what we have listed is all the folks that were staffed on or served in a commissioner role in 2020. We are still, we're going to have to pull a couple of folks aside just to make sure that we have captured this properly. If you see that we have not captured your titling or the organization that you represent that you'd like to have listed here, please let us know. Not for 2021, but of course, thinking on 2020. And this is why we send it up. So we want to make sure that this is proper. And then of course, Douglas, thank you so much for adding yours. I really appreciate that initiative. So we have, I'm sorry, yes?
Mine is the Pacific Islander Community Association.
Pacific Islander.
Community Association, yeah.
Apologies, Joseph.
Oh, no, it's all good. Pacific Islander Community Association of Washington.
Thank you so much, and apologies.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. The other one is just the old one.
Okay. Is this reflective of 2020?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone else that is currently on the call that's like, hey, let me make an adjustment. Can make it in real time. We can also do it here in about 20 minutes or 15 minutes when we get back to this part as well. Okay, and if you're shy, you can also email me separately. That is also okay. And then also the last part of this below, we have 2020 staff. So you will see names of folks. You're like, hey, haven't heard this name in a while. That's because we're talking about 2020. And then we have a little asterisk next to some of the names are people who are no longer on staff or no longer on the commission so that it's clear to the public as well, but we list them here. And then lastly, of course, we have our CPC mission, vision, and then our annual report requirements within SMC. So that completely rounds us out. So this is the 2020 annual report. Of course, once we have made those polishing edits, any feedback we receive at the end of this conversation will be incorporated. Then it'll be handed over to Jesse, and he will turn this into his usual work of wonderful, beautiful formatting, making it pretty and polished, and then it'll go up on the website and filed with the city clerk. Any initial thoughts or questions? We're going to do more at the end before I hand it over to Lisa. Any quick hit items that you kind of just want to address that I can do right now, or we can wait till a little bit later. But I want to give folks an opportunity just in case while I scroll to the top in a slow manner, purposefully. Okay, perfect. Now I will hand things over. I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand things over to Louisa to talk more about the wonderful accountability ordinance tracker. Louisa.
Thank you, Shay. Director Morris. I'm just going to give you guys a quick summary of why we report on the ordinance, how we've done it in the past, and how we're proposing to do it now. So of course, the accountability ordinance was passed in 2017, and it created the whole accountability system as we understand it today. So it did things, it specifies roles and responsibilities and duties, and some of them are pretty obvious, like the CPC shall have a director, the director shall do this, it shall have 21 commissioners, same for OPA and OIG, and then some more programmatic things. It has a number, it has 258 items on it. And then one of these items is that the CPC, similarly to the other accountability agencies, needs to report on the status of all of these items annually on our annual report. So the way this has been done in the past, and if anybody here was around for that, feel free to also add anything, is that the agencies would get together and go through the ordinance. They had a big table, a big Excel sheet, literally, and they would go through the items and be like, okay, where's this one standing? This one's done. This one's implemented. This one's pending. This one ran into a roadblock or two. And then the agencies would report on that on their annual report. So in our last annual report from 2019, we have a huge table or a list or an appendix that lists the status of each of those things. So earlier this year, when we started working on the annual report and we started thinking about how to report on the status of the ordinance, we had two things to do. One was to just update the table, right? So the last information we had was from 2019, and we had to go around again and check each of the items and make sure the ones that hadn't been implemented, check whether they have by now been implemented. And this involves not just SPD and the 3 accountability agencies, but other departments in the city as well. So it also involves the city attorney, the PSCSC, the Public Safety Civil Service Commission, HR, the fire department, a bunch of different parts of the city. And then the other thing we had to do was think about how to present that in a way that was useful, that wasn't just a really inaccessible, clunky, long list. So that's similarly to the recommendations, that's how we arrived at the idea of a tracking dashboard on the website. So the advantage of that is that it tells a story, it gives more takeaways as opposed to just a long list. It kind of tells you what's the important thing to note here, and it remains available year round. So not just once a year when we publish a report, you can go and check it all the time, and we can update it throughout the year as opposed to just once a year. And when reporting time comes along, the updates are ready to go. So we started from the table from last year, just so you know where the information comes from. We started from last year's annual report. We made sure everything that's in the ordinance was in that table. We created a database, a newer database, just in a format that's easier to maintain. And then we went back to the agencies, all of them, and we brought to them the items that either we thought would be outdated or had not yet been implemented. So we were like, this, you hadn't done this by the year before. Have you done it? Have you been able to do it now? Or the items that we had no data on. And we either email or we sat down and had meetings with OPA, OIG, PSCSC, HR, city attorney, and the fire department and SPD, and we got all of their updates. And so we updated the big table. And in that process, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, we also had the items that pertain to the CPC. So the things that are like responsibilities of the CPC or programs the CPC should be running. We also went through and updated those according to what we knew had happened in the last year. So just to give you, I'll start sharing my screen. And this is just for your context. This is what the database looks like. It's a SharePoint database. It's a big table. Every single citation, every duty, responsibility item in the ordinance, and then the status as far as we know. And then, just like PART, we went and created an interactive dashboard on the CPC website to relay that information to the public. So this is not published. This is a QA website. It's just a testing website. This has not yet been published, but you will see that it looks a lot like our recommendations tracker. We maintained a similar visual identity just so that it's easier to navigate. But of course, instead of reporting on recommendations, it reports on the status of the ordinance items. The graphs at the top give a summary, and then you can see item one by one at the bottom. You can filter to find things more easily. But the main story here, what I would highlight is that the ordinance is mostly implemented. So over 3/4 of the ordinance has been implemented. Some of the other items are partially implemented or in progress, and that's because these agencies were set up and had limited capacity and are still working. Some things we're still working on taking off, getting a paper. But about 15%, 14% of them have not been implemented at all, and most of them because of the collective bargaining agreement. So of course, this is something you are all already familiar with. The last round of contract negotiations rolled back a number of the reforms that have passed when council passed this accountability ordinance. And this is a huge part of why the CPC keeps working on the contracts. It's working on the contracts currently to make sure that the reforms that we fought for and that community supported and that passed in legislation don't get rolled back by the collective bargaining agreements. So this is what the tracker looks like. I won't stay here too long. I will just highlight a couple of other things. One is that this isn't organized by agency because the ordinance isn't really organized by agency. It creates OPA, it revamps OPA, the CPC, and OIG, but the items, most of the items in it need to be implemented kind of generally, involve the work, involved interdepartmental work, involves collaboration. So this is less about who implemented what and more about why is it that the things that have not been implemented yet. And then the other thing I'll highlight is back to the annual report. And you'll see that this is something Shailene already showed you, but you'll see that we give the accountability ordinance item on the left, and then on the right, the status, and then the agency that reported on that. So for instance, OPA gave us these notes about why these certain items are not yet implemented. And then there were also items that pertain to the CPC or that the CPC knew something about that we created the status updates. We drafted them as staff, and these are the ones in yellow. And these are the items that we still need approval from the CPC. So we drafted them as far from what we knew as staff. Most of us weren't around in 2019. So we need these to be reviewed and approved by the commission and CPC leadership. There are about 18 of them. And that's the only thing I would say that's standing in the way of the full ordinance tracker being updated and being able to be published. Of course, if there's any other feedback on the interface or any of the details or anything, we're more than happy to take them. But in terms of reviewing these CPC updates, I will hand it back to Shailene to talk about some of our options to review and approve them.
Thank you, Louisa. Okay. So like she stated, there are We believe that outside of any other large feedback that folks might have about this tracker, again, it's very similar to PART, are those 18 pieces that Louisa is talking about that need commission approval because it's taking essentially a stance, and it's a public stance that's taken within those pieces of the accountability ordinance. And because we weren't around during that time, we want to, one, ensure as staff that we are capturing that appropriately. And that too, you're also seeing what the CPC is saying before the tracker is posted. Our partners, similar to PART, have also seen their pieces that we have captured within this tracker. They received it months back earlier when this was drafted. And then we had some conversations with some, not just our our accountability partners, but also some city departments are also listed within the accountability ordinance. So there are a couple of options that we have this morning, and then of course, it's up to everyone here. So we have on the agenda until 11:30, so we have about 30 minutes left to discuss the annual report and any other feedback, comments, or questions that folks may have feedback, comments, or questions folks may have about the accountability ordinance tracker, to have that conversation, and then move into a voting process for one or both of these pieces. So my suggestion, then I can leave it to you on and pass it back up to Edie Grant, is we have the conversation discussion first. And then from there, if we have time to move into individual votes for all 18 pieces, I think we can move through it rather quickly and make sure that everyone has sign off on all those pieces if we are able to. I think we have the time within 30 minutes. I think we can get it done depending on how much feedback folks have. So I will leave that to you all, and I'll turn it back over to Executive Director Grant to facilitate that conversation or decision point at this juncture.
All right. Thank you, Shailene. Thank you, Louisa. Really appreciate you ladies. So with that being said, I'm going to concur with Shailene on that. I feel like there should be a review of, separate from the annual report, there should be a review of the 18 statuses, then discuss, and then we do a round of voting through those various 18 statuses. But I think the annual report is something separate from that. And so it should be 2 separate votes. One for the annual report for us to be able to move forward with finalizing any edits and putting it in its most polished version so it can go live. And what we can do is if there are not any additional edits or comments, we can vote to approve it, clean it up, get it ready. Or if you all would like some additional time with it, you can also put a motion forth to, my hope would be that we could move past it. Again, it's entirely up to you all. But I think at this point, you know, this is a breadth of work that was being held back and has had so many different reiterations of it before it ever came to you all. And so now that you've seen it and had some time to spend with it, we would really love to be able to move forward so we can get this off of staff's plate so we can begin to start some new projects and some new work, honestly. And then, so my recommendation would be for you all to vote to approve the document so we can get it ready to go live. And then the second thing would be for someone to put, for Shailene and her team to walk us through the 18 statuses, and then we either vote one by one, or we would, for those, we probably need to vote one by one. And the ordinance tracker, to me, also has a level of urgency around it too, just because we've held on to it for so long, because it has not been exposed fully to the commission up until now for various reasons. And so we just want to make sure that if we are going to extend it, we want to hear from you a potential date to get that wrapped up as well, so we can get that live for community. So thoughts, commissioners?
Well, I move that we accept the draft annual report and give the staff our support to move it forward.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Oh, okay, I thought I heard somebody unmute. Any opposed? Yeas have it. We will be moving forward with accepting the draft annual report. For the second item regarding the ordinance tracker, is there, would you all like for us to go through the statuses one by one? So you have an opportunity to review today, since we have 26 minutes left of this allotted time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Shailene, let's go ahead, either between you and Louisa, let's go through that.
Let's do it. Perfect. Okay, so thank you again for the vote on the annual report. Super happy. We will give you updated on the polishing, the formatting, and as it goes out the door. And again, if you have any things related to your title or to the committees, as I asked for, those two pieces, if you can send them by end of day, fantastic. End of day, as I said, not close of business is 11:59 p.m. So close of business 5 o'clock, if you can. So, okay, let's move on to the accountability ordinance. So what we'll do is we'll go through them one by one. And then if there's any comments, concerns, feedback on each one, we can discuss it then. If there isn't, similar I did to the OPA manual review, we'll go through all 18. At the very end, I think we could do the vote at the very end. And if there's comments or concerns for each one, we'll discuss it in that moment and make revisions as need be, because we do have 25 minutes and we've got the time to do it. We work quick. So Louisa, if you want to go ahead and get started, pull up the tracker on your end, and we'll just start with the first one and go through it.
How do you want to do this, Shay? Do you want to go ahead and read them, or do you want me to read them and then?
I'll let you go ahead and do it, read through them and go through. I think that's
Okay.
fine. It's really got
Sounds
it.
good. Okay, if I can't see everybody and share the screen. So if I can't see you, feel free to interrupt me if you have any comments. Can everybody see the table with the yellow highlights?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first item, this table is only of the 60 ordinance items that have not been fully implemented. So the first one is, and these are summaries. This is not the direct ordinance language. We summarize them for, to keep it brief. But the first one is OPA, OIG, CPC, and SPD shall engage in quarterly collaborative conversations to effectuate coordinated oversight, review the extent to which ordinance purposes and requirements are being met. So we drafted this as partially implemented, and we said that quarterly meetings begin in the third quarter of 2018, but have not always consistently reviewed the implementation of the ordinance. So leadership of the agencies, they do meet every quarter, and they talk about a host of things. They don't every single meeting go through every single item of the ordinance, which is why we call this partially implemented. I'll give it a second. If anybody has any thoughts, or I'll just keep going. The second item is OIG shall enhance SPD culture of accountability through collaborating with the chief, OPA director, and SPD leadership to strengthen supervisory involvement, assisting SPD in development and delivery of in-service training on the accountability system, collaborating with SPD to make the disciplinary process fair, timely, transparent, and effective. From our understanding, again, we weren't here in 2019. We haven't been here for most of the work on the in-service training, but our understanding of the status of this is that the accountability system in-service training was implemented, but has since been paused and is not currently being offered.
It's true.
Does that seem accurate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's so great to have you, Robin Walden. Thank you so much for that. Yes, for just having been here this whole time and knowing what's up. So the next one is the CPC may request and shall timely receive, without the need of a public disclosure request, information from SPD and city departments that they would publicly disclose. So we drafted this as partially implemented, and said the CPC makes repeated requests to SPD and sometimes OPA for documents that would otherwise be available through public disclosure requests, and frequently has not received them in a timely manner. For instance, the CPC requested the SPD/monitor policy review schedule in the fall of 2020 and recommended that it is made public in January 2021, but has yet to receive it. The next one is the CPC shall consist of 21 commissioners, 7 selected by the mayor, 7 by the council, and 7 by the CPC, including public defense, civil liberties, SPOG, and SPMA representatives. And when we drafted this in May, we drafted it as partially implemented and said, as of May 2021, the CPC filled 20 out of 21 commissioner seats. And it is your choice if you would like to update this to September 2021 and how many seats we have now.
Do you want that discussion now or later?
Maybe let's save it.
Okay.
I'll flag number 25 and then we'll come back. Okay, thank you. Number 26, CPC shall make each appointment sufficiently before the expiration of the incumbent's term. Appointments to fill resignations shall occur as staff. Commissioners may stay as interim until a successor is appointed. And we drafted as partially implemented and said the CPC has not consistently been able to make timely reappointments to fill vacancies. Number 27, CPC shall assign commissioners to represent council districts who live, work, or have ties, understand issues, actively engage people, report back to the CPC. We call that in progress and said, due to the pandemic, limited capacity and commission turnover, commissioner community engagement was restricted and the CPC is reinvigorating it in 2021, including district-specific engagement. 28, the CPC shall convene annual meetings to receive public comments and present highlights of CPC's annual report. We drafted this as in progress. While the commission held its first annual report meeting in 2019, it suspended the 2020 spring meeting due to COVID-19. The CPC will host an annual report meeting in 2021. Next, CPC shall review closed OPA investigations for opportunities for systemic improvements. CPC shall not serve as a review board for individual investigations, evaluate or opine on evidence, findings, or determinations, or seek to influence course or outcome. We said in progress. The commission has begun this work and is activating a work group to review closed OPA cases in 2021. Again, this is what we drafted back in May. If there are any updates, we can definitely redraft this, not a problem. Next one, CPC shall review and provide input on SPD recruiting, hiring, promotional practices, assist in development, delivery of in-service training on accountability system. We said this is not implemented. The CPC plans to review recruiting, hiring, and promotional practices, as well as continue the work on an in-service training module about the accountability system with OIG and OPA in 2021. The accountability system in-service training was implemented, but has since been paused and is not currently being offered. This is what we said in the similar item above. Next one, SPD and OPA shall respond in writing within 30 days to any oversight entity issuing recommendations. For accepted one, provide a plan for implementation and regular written progress reports. For decline, explain why not. If the lead entity is a city department, mayor's office shall coordinate the response. This is one that's very near and dear to my heart. We said it's not implemented. Many responses miss the 30-day deadline. Most do not include plans for implementation or regular written progress reports or explanations for being declined. The mayor's office has not coordinated responses for other departments. Next, the OPA director, inspector general, and CPC co-chairs, and the police chief shall meet quarterly to review and verify positions on the status of recommendations. We call this partially implemented and said the accountability partners meet quarterly, but do not consistently review the status of recommendations in these quarterly meetings. Partners plan to reconfigure quarterly meetings in 2021. The next one is with CPC, OIG, and OPA, SPD shall establish a schedule and protocol for meaningfully reviewing policy manual revisions. SPD did not establish, partially implemented, SPD did not establish a policy review schedule and protocol in consultation with all accountability partners. The schedule and protocol are not visible to the public. This is something we've discussed before, and have not allowed for meaningful reviews that sufficiently engage the community. So again, this is about the SPD policy manual. Next, all appeals shall be governed by chapters 329 and 408. Only prior appeals shall continue according to relevant contractual or legislative procedures. And from our understanding, this is not implemented because the CBA is ratified by the city in 2018, did not implement this reform, which you'll see right above and right below has been given by, this is the same update SPD and OPA have given for several other items. SPD shall develop and implement recruitment, hiring, testing, training, mentoring, assignment, promotional practices that emphasize skills consistent with accountability, equity, consent decree goals, and consult with CPC and OIG. We call this partially implemented and said SPD has not yet implemented community service preference points and other relevant recruitment and training practices, which the preference points will come back. The next one is SPD shall use preference points in hiring sworn employees who are multilingual or have experienced background with diverse communities, social work, mental health, domestic violence, and community service. Partially implemented. SPD has implemented language preference points, but not yet community service preference points. And we know that they're actively working on the community service preference points, on determining the guidelines. We have been attending those meetings, so we know that this is a work in progress. That also involves several agencies. The next one is a bit of a repeat. SPD shall collaborate with OPA, OIG, and CPC in the development delivery of an in-service training on the accountability system. We called it partially implemented. The accountability system in-service training was implemented, but has since been paused and is not currently being offered. Almost there. For sworn employees terminated or resigned instead of termination, SPD shall include documentation in files that a letter was sent to the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission regarding decertification, whether any action was taken, and that the chief will not authorize special commission service and will not grant request to carry a firearm. So SPD did give an update on this one. They said SPD's Human Resource Division maintains a copy of each letter in the employee's personnel file, and other methods of retention would be subject to negotiation. But our understanding is that this note does not address items B, C, and D in the ordinance item, so we called it partially implemented. Last one, provisions subject to Public Employees Collective Bargaining Act shall not be effective until city completes collective bargaining obligations. The city shall take steps to fulfill legal prerequisites within 30 days, including negotiating with unions to update agreements to conform with these provisions. So we determined that this was, or we suggested that this was not implemented because the most recent police union contracts adopted by the city do not conform and are not fully consistent with the provisions and obligations of the ordinance in a manner that allows for the earliest possible implementation of the police accountability reform. All prerequisite steps for other provisions of the ordinance that do not require bargaining, such as community service preference points, have also not been taken. So the easy one for us to discuss is number 25. That was just about updating the number of commissioner seats that are filled. But of course, if anybody has any thoughts or updates or knowledge, historical knowledge about any of these items, I'll just open the floor.
Could we also look at number 30?
Number 30.
Just because I think that in July of 2017, we did do a report on recruitment and hiring. So that was before anyone on staff's time, but Reverend Malden might remember it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a report.
Sorry,
Well,
was that before or after the ordinance in 2017?
Just after.
Okay.
Okay. I don't remember it being after it. So, I mean, it could have been. I know that we did do a report about recruitment, and that was when Ann Bettersmith was still here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Did you find something else other than that, Jessica? Because I remember that was a report about recruitment.
Yeah, it was. It was about recruitment, hiring, training, and it was recommendations to the Seattle Police Department. It was published in July 2017, which I believe the ordinance was May 2017, so super close there.
Okay. Well, then that's the only one that I know about. Then I think that Ann was still with us then. And Bettersworth on policy. Is that correct?
That's great.
Yeah, she was the lead on that one.
So
Mhm,
my
that's what I thought.
suggestion here, this is a read-only copy, so I won't do it on the screen, but I'll take note. My suggestion would be to change this to partially implemented and say the CPC published a report in July 2017 on hiring and recruitment. And then the piece about the in-service training not currently being offered is what would keep it partially implemented as opposed to fully implemented, although we did assist in the delivery of it. So if you all think that makes it implemented, I can change it to that too.
No.
I also think it might be missing the promotional practices part.
Okay, not promotional. Not promotional, and then in-service training suspended. And then that would be partially implemented. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so
Mhm.
much. That's very helpful. What about number 25? What would you all like to do about number 25? Just updated to as of September 2021, the CPC has filled blank out of 21 commissioner seats.
That makes sense to me to make it as current as possible.
Okay. We can do that.
Sorry, and I can't remember if we discussed this already and I'm bringing something old back up, but should we be looking at where we were at the end of December 2020 since it's last year's annual report?
Yeah, I'll agree. Yeah, probably.
Is this for the, I'm sorry, is this for the annual report or for the like up-to-date kind of like accountability tracker?
Of both. This is for the annual
Okay.
report piece here, but then this is also the information that will go into the tracker, which remains up to date. If that
Got it.
makes
So there might be like two different answers here.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
say there's a fair amount of, because this is the report is focused on 2020 specifically, of course, but there are a couple of places, like when we say, for instance, these are no longer commissioners or the staff is no longer present, that we say, as of this report's writing, this is the update on this because it's like information that we deem useful. But we can certainly revise for that, revise the whole report to remove those.
Well, I agree. If this is going with a 2020 annual report, then it needs to be the information as of December 31st, 2020. And then on our website with the accountability tracker, it can be current.
We can do that.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Or on any of the other items, did anything sound outdated, or are there any other references to the spring of 2021 that we would like to remove? For instance, this is just an example to show my what I was worried about. For instance, we say that up here, we requested the policy review schedule in the fall of 2021 and recommended that it was made public in the fall of 2020 and recommended that it was made public in January 2021, but have not yet received it.
Right.
Is this a reference that we should remove?
No, I don't think so, because it shows the work, the line of continuation of the work, that some of it was done and then the other is not. So it would be partially implemented.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to back that up further, there's a number of instances that we could also like include here. So just to be clear, it's not like just this one instance.
Yeah, this is an example.
Yeah. I mean, other than the appointees, I mean, everything else is a continuation of work that was started in 2020, and then still waiting to see if it's going to be implemented in 2021. So I think the way that you all have done this is so, I think it's wonderful, and it shows the work where we had cooperation and when the cooperation broke down, and some of these it just kind of evaporated, the cooperation between the partners or SPD. So it does highlight that there, and also it's still a work in progress on some of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Completely. Are there any other items that anybody has any updates to or any thoughts before I guess I send it back to you all to put it to a vote? Incorporating the edits we discussed on items 25 and 30.
Right.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Louisa. Thank you, Shailene.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. If we could get someone to put a motion on the floor to vote for those 18 with edits to 2.
I'll step away from the chair and recommend that these recommendations go forth with the edits that's already been approved, that's already been noted by as we were going along. I'll clean it up. I'll clean it up. I make a motion that that these recommendations be voted on, be approved of, and noting that the edits had already been accepted.
Thank you, Reverend Walden. Does anyone second that?
Yes. I'll second.
Thank you, Reverend Hunter. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any abstentions? Any opposed? The yeas have it. We will be moving forward with the 18 items with 2 noted corrections to be made that have been reviewed. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I just want to come back on camera real quick and just give, again, just a quick process overview of everything you voted on. You voted on to approve the annual report and voted on to approve those 18 pieces of the accountability ordinance and the ordinance of itself. So what happens moving forward is the annual report, again, will get cleaned up with the edits that people have sent over to us, what we discussed today. It will then be reviewed once more by the policy team. It will be sent over to Jesse for him to do his magical comms work. Once it's completed in that format, we will review it once again, final approval internally with staff all the way up to leadership chain, and then it will go live on the website. Similar to the accountability ordinance, the edits you discussed today will go into place. It will be reviewed, and then Louisa, who is the owner and operator of that, it will go live on the website alongside the annual report together. And those will still go through our typical review process and chain for final approval outside of here, just to make sure that it's all polished.
Can I just ask a clarification, a process clarification question, just to be sure we're covering all our bases? We voted on the CPC status in the accountability ordinance database. Do we want to vote on publishing the tracker for the go live, or is that?
No, we don't have to do that.
We don't have to do that. Okay.
That was part of that piece.
That was part of it.
Thank you for the clarification, though. All right, thank you, ladies. Appreciate you so much. Thank you for the recap also as well, too, for what's next and what will be expected. We are a little bit ahead, not too much, but getting right on back on time. Jesse, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to have a conversation about the mayor's candidate forum options. Next steps.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen. We hoped to have this on the agenda last week. However, due to some emergent issues, we weren't able to get to it on last week's agenda. However, we just need some guidance on how to move forward with the mayoral debate that the CPC approved back in early August or late July. I really just want this to be hoping to just set up a conversation between commissioners about how they want to move forward. I have a few options, but these are just conversation starters. So if there's different ideas, we're definitely not tied to these whatsoever, but I'll share them on the screen just for some clarity. To move forward, the first option could be to cancel it altogether if we can't get buy-in from both mayoral candidates. The second would be to host a town hall style forum and invite both candidates and continue to host that forum even if one of the candidates chooses not to attend. And the third option would be to invite both candidates to speak at an upcoming CPC meeting and answer questions from commissioners. However, with that, I'll turn it over to the commission.
I'd like to speak in favor of number 3.
I know I'm not a commissioner, but I also am in favor of number 3.
Number 3 worked for me as well.
I agree with that as well.
I would actually prefer 2. I'm happy to speak about that if that would be helpful.
Yeah, Austin, I guess, yeah, let's talk about it. You know, your option for 2, let's try to see if we can get it narrowed down and then give you all an opportunity to decide on what you want to go with. And like Jesse said too, none of these are set in stone. You're all more than welcome to offer up another suggestion as well too.
Sorry, so should I
Yeah.
just, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thinking is that since we exist primarily to be the voice of the community, we should create as many opportunities as possible for community members to speak themselves. And since we've heard that both candidates would be excited to participate in a town hall style thing, we just have to figure out the scheduling on that piece. And since the CPC would benefit because this would be a high profile event that would help us sort of continue to introduce ourselves to the community and make sure that people know who we are and what we do and that we're available. It kind of seems like a win-win for the candidates and the Community Police Commission, and a way for us to fulfill the most important part of our mission, which is to let community voices be heard. I think the issue with a CPC meeting and just questions from commissioners is that participation obviously is limited. Often with these meetings, time is limited as well. There's a lot of other issues that we have to face, and so we wouldn't necessarily have the time to really get into as many questions as we would would be able to in a town hall style format. Yeah, just the combination of limiting participation and also limiting the amount of time and the amount of questions that would come with number 3 just seems like a missed opportunity to me.
I'd like to speak for the other one, the inviting the candidates, because we have had special meetings before. And so if we called a special meeting, the whole time would be we would only have one item on the agenda, and it would be this item that the candidates would be there and answer questions. And I think we did something similar to this after what happened last summer, that we extended it, and we had people was able to make comments at that meeting. So.
Well, I mean, I'd be okay with it if it was the kind of thing where it's a mixed format, where people are able to, like, people from the community are invited and are able to ask questions too. I don't have an issue with that. That makes sense to me.
We have the technology for that also. I mean, because that's what we did before. And I believe we have the technology to be able to offer that kind of meeting.
Yeah, if we wanted to have a special meeting, we do have some special technology that we could actually make it kind of like better looking and more inclusive and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think for me, as long as I think as much time as possible is devoted to community questions.
Right.
You know, I'm fine with a special meeting. That kind of sounds to me like sort of a town hall almost anyway. So I think we pretty much agree on the basic format. So yeah, sounds good.
So now would we have to suggest several other dates for both candidates, since that other date did not work, you know, for both candidates, for one of those candidates. So would we suggest several dates to send out to the candidates? How would we organize that?
Yeah, now that we're kind of close to election day, I imagine it's going to be a little bit tougher to schedule, but we could either do like something like a doodle poll or something else like that, where we ask the candidates and try to find like some common time. If that works for you, Reverend Walden, and everyone else.
Oh, well, yeah, it works for other commissioners. So would we do a special meeting?
Yeah, if you guys want to do it in the evening, I think that tends to be a time where more community members who aren't working during the day can join, and it sounds like that's something that we want as community participation in this. And just one more point of clarification about like the style that you would like. Would you like both candidates on at the same time, or would you like them on at separate times?
Do we have to, I don't know. I let somebody else speak to that. I mean, it looks good to have people at the same time, but so I let other people speak.
I think at the same time, posing questions to both people and letting them both respond makes sense to me. You can also vary the order too. So you give, one candidate a chance to answer one question first and the next candidate a chance to answer the next question first and things like that. But I think having some interplay between the two of them would be helpful. Identifying areas where they agree, where they disagree, that kind of thing.
Perfect. And in the event that we can't get a date where both candidates can participate, how would you like us to move forward?
Well, I'm hesitant to just have one candidate because I really don't want it to sound like an endorsement of CPC for one candidate. So I guess I would hope that we could have both. I mean, I don't know. I just want them both there, if at all possible. Yeah, so that's my hesitation with one, and maybe kind of toying with canceling it if both of them can't be there, but I just think they both need to be there, or having two separate ones.
I think we can revisit that maybe if, we try this week to schedule something, and if it doesn't work, maybe we can revisit that and try to find a path forward, because like Reverend Hunter said, there's a lot of ways that it might not work. Maybe a different option would present itself just by virtue of how the scheduling conflict plays out or something like that.
Perfect. I think what we've talked about so far is some sort of evening debate, reaching out to both campaigns via something like a doodle poll and trying to see if there's some common time that they might have. And then revisiting it if one or more candidates no longer have time on their schedule.
With a lot of community question opportunities would be the only other thing I would add to what you already said.
Perfect. And I can't move for that, but another commissioner could.
I'll move for everything Jesse just summarized with my addendum of community question time to be approved by the broader commission.
Excuse me, this is Teresa Chen with the City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to confirm that you have a quorum to proceed with agenda items, especially voting on any items. Also, direction to staff currently, if you don't have a quorum, is not really formalized without a quorum present to provide that direction. So if you have lost quorum, I recommend whoever's taking the minutes to reflect that quorum is not lost. You can still proceed with this discussion, but I don't believe it would be appropriate to vote at this time. The same goes for executive session. Unless you have a quorum of commissioners return for that, it appears that executive session should probably be postponed as well.
Right. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Doing a count right now.
All right.
I
Jesse?
count that we have 8 commissioners on. I believe that we have 19 commissioners total. Quorum would then be 10 people. So I believe we're at a last quorum.
All right.
However, the CPC already did vote to have a debate, and this does sound just kind of like an alternative style of a debate. So I wonder if like this could just be like guidance less than a vote for something that the CPC has already voted on.
Makes sense to me.
And me as well.
Teresa, do you have anything to add? Is that something that would be acceptable? Because we have already voted on this.
I think that that's a call for your new co-chairs to make. And Jesse, being very familiar with the communication strategy, I think that's something that internally you all can decide, you know, whether this is something that you would like formal direction from the commission on, in which case you would have to wait until you have a quorum at the next meeting, or if this is something that works for your new co-chairs to sign off on.
So then we're posing the question then to our new co-chairs. Are all of the co-chairs on?
Yes, I'm present.
Yeah, I'm
This
here
is
too.
Catherine.
I'm here. Mhm.
I think that makes, not speaking for all the co-chairs, but to me, I think that makes sense, and it sounds like a good plan to proceed, following Jesse's suggestion.
To send out the doodle, I mean,
Yeah, send out. So moving forward with the debate that the CPC has already approved, but looking to send out a doodle poll sometime this week to the candidates to see if there's some mutual time. And then if we do find a mutual time, moving forward with the debate in a style like we've discussed today.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with that approach. That sounds like a good plan.
Reverend Walden? Thank you, Douglas.
and I think my only concern is that if none of this works, then do we have, will we be willing to just go cancel the event, or would we still be trying to see what we can do with it? And maybe we can just wait until the doodle is sent out and we get some response, because we don't know what the calendar looks like. So I mean, I'm all right with it, you know. I mean, because the calendars are probably set by now, and so we'll know in a few days of what their calendars are like.
Yeah, I agree with Reverend Walden. I think that makes sense.
Awesome, thank you all. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, commissioners. Per Teresa's guidance, thank you so much for letting us know about the quorum in the executive session. So the last part of our agenda was for us to actually go into executive session with just our legal team, Sussman and Godfrey. So at this time, we will postpone that until the next meeting and conclude with a meeting wrap up. Reverend Walden, you had mentioned that there were a couple of new business items that you wanted to add, points that you wanted to bring up for the next meeting. Sorry.
Oh, one would be if we could add to the agenda is revisiting the bylaws and to look at the gaps in that. Also, we got at one time we were going to the meetings with the police department around crisis intervention and and those meetings, and they're going up again. And I will send you an email to when the meetings are. I attend for mothers, but in the past I've also attended for the CPC, but I want to bring that to your attention. So I'll do that and I'll send it to you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for their participation today in today's meeting. And I also want to congratulate the new co-chairs. I look forward to working with you in a more robust capacity. Thank you all for everybody's patience. I know this was a pretty long meeting, but I feel like a really important one that was valuable, and we were to get some work moved. we'll postpone executive session until the next meeting. I want to thank everybody for your time and for joining us today. This concludes Wednesday, September 15th, CPC meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy.
Thank you, Brandy.
Thank
Thank you.
That's all.